Hello and welcome to the Freak Show. This is episode 22. Today we will be talking about getting to the root of anxiety to foster healing.
Hello, hello.
Yes. As we said in episode 21, we're in a different environment. If you're watching on YouTube, we're actually filming from our home. And if you can hear our dog hacking in the background, well, then that's just part of it. But we wanted to bring the production home, have a little bit more control over the quality and the environment, the scenery that you see in the video. And we're happy to be here. It's also just a lot more comfortable for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have Chipotle on my face?
You don't have Chipotle on your face.
Okay.
Sam just ordered Chipotle. And we had our lunch at home. So often in our society and medical system, we treat the symptoms of a problem instead of the root cause. But today I wanted to, since I took the lead on writing this episode, I wanted to try and get to the root of anxiety, and specifically my anxiety, so that real healing could occur and hopefully positively affect the rest of my life and bodily systems. And the reason I share this is because if I'm going through it, chances are some of you are going through it as well. And I want to share a really profound experience that I had regarding getting to the root of my anxiety. But first, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, let's talk about some announcements that we have. Do you want to launch with the first one?
Sure. So if you listen to the last episode, we made the announcement that we have our Freak app that we are going to be launching August 26th. Let me
My
clear
birthday.
my throat. That's right. That is Jacqueline's birthday. So that's our target date. We're going to hit it. We have all of the initial calibrations recorded. We
Done
have
and dusted.
the frequency composed that coincides with those calibrations. So we are super excited about that. We feel like the app is our offering to the world right now, and people are really going to love it and enjoy it and get a lot from it.
Yeah.
It's basically,
we created what we wanted to have. Yeah. So we created what we wanted to have. And I wanted beautiful messages that combined literal frequency. And so we worked with a composer and we chose specific frequencies for specific messages to enhance the power of the message. And so when you download the app and you create a login, you'll be able to see, I think it's 21 different frequencies. So everything from joy to self-worth to self-belief. And then also you can choose activities, walking, driving in your car, sitting, doing your legs up the wall, cold plunging, all kinds of different activities. And so this is an app. I haven't seen anything like it on the market, and we are so excited to be able to offer it. And like we said, we're on schedule to launch August 26th. So here we go.
Yeah. I was going to say it's different from pretty much all mindset apps I think that you'll find out there. It's very personal in that it's your voice, my voice, basically sharing some stories that are relatable to those different topics, and just sharing our experience and encouraging the users and the listeners to calibrate that frequency, calibrate their frequency on a daily basis.
To tune their energy daily. That's what the tool is about. Secondly, thank you to everyone who has been leaving us reviews. It makes this podcast more searchable. And I want to highlight one that was written recently by, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, but Ari in MT. I'm assuming that's Montana. And he recently wrote, this podcast is fantastic. I think it's a she though. This podcast is fantastic. I've been listening to Jacqueline for years, and she has gotten me through some tough times, helping me keep my frequency high while keeping it real and down to earth. This content is digestible, easy to put into action, and also easily adaptable to multiple areas of life. It's positive and uplifting, and they truly believe in keeping a high frequency, practicing what they talk about. I love, love, love this new podcast with Sam involved. So much fun. Thank you both so much. I thrive with content like this. I look forward to it each week on my morning hike. Awesome that you take a morning hike each week. I am a little jealous that you live in Montana, and thank you so much for taking the time to write a review. It really means so much to us, and it motivates us to keep creating more content.
Yep.
So thank you. Lastly, we are in the process of creating and launching several different offerings that are a really big deal for us and that are all geared toward making your life better and making your life a higher frequency life. We are creating things that we want and then offering them to the world. And so if you want to be in the know on all of these things that we're creating, please join our email list. I will link it in the notes. You can also sign up via our Instagram profile at Beckon Living. But we're calling it the Beckon Times, and it will have all of the latest news for what we are creating, podcast episodes, and then also links to really cool high frequency products that we get a discount for our listeners.
Yep.
Yeah. And then if you haven't joined our texting group, which is something that I used to do with the Self-Worth podcast, it was called Sacred Rebel Affirmations. We now have the High Frequency Society. And Sam and I compose beautiful short messages that we believe will uplift you and help shift your frequency upward during the day. And so if you want to sign up for those, you can text us at 480-531-6858. That's 480-531-6858. Or you can click the link in our show notes. All right. So let's get in to the episode now. This one is very personal for me. And because we are very transparent about what's going on in our lives on this podcast, I wanted to continue with that transparency and admit, for as much frequency work as I do to calibrate myself and keep my frequency high, the last week, really like more like 4 to 5 days, have been tough. And I've been feeling under attack. Christians, I think, would label that as spiritual attack. You can label it however you want, but I've certainly felt like I have been under attack mentally. And to me, that looks and feels like my self-assuredness being pulled out from under me. And then it spirals into like, well, I'm going to spend all this time, money, energy creating this, and it's going to go nowhere. Or women, I'm sure you can relate to this. I'll see like a photo of myself or something, and maybe it was unflattering. And then I start thinking about all the things I need to do to change the way that I look. And it's not always this, but these are just some examples. But over the last few days in particular, until I had a very profound event happen, I was just feeling down. I was feeling uninspired. I was feeling vulnerable about how I look. And it was deeply affecting me. And for someone who most of the time does not feel like that, it felt particularly severe because we are coming off of a time that has been so high frequency. I feel like we have faced some of the scariest things we've ever had to face this year, and we've done it pretty triumphantly. And our biggest project that we listed in May is now under contract, and it's supposed to sell in a couple of weeks. And so we had, a very big win. And I feel like after that big win, about a week after, I let my guard down as far as my mental acuity and my mental fitness goes, I got a little bit more lax with monitoring my thoughts. And I feel like the enemy saw an in and just went full bore into battle against me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to share what happened as a result, because as we've said over and over, we believe that everything is happening for us. And while I don't wish these difficult times or mental attacks on anyone, I do know that if we stick in it and we're willing to learn the lessons, we often come out on the other side with a more expanded, better perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's just the reality of life. Like, there are going to be those periods where, you know, you don't feel like your best self.
Yeah,
And
I feel like with everything that I know, I should be able to outwit it.
well, I think it's
You know?
good to stop and one, recognize what you're feeling, or recognize that you're feeling that way, and then dissect it to understand the root of it, which is what you're
Yeah.
going to explain here. But
Yeah.
recognize it, process it, and move forward.
Yeah. And like I said, it felt particularly severe because I was coming off a period of time where we have gone through some of the toughest financial circumstances we've ever faced. And I feel like my mental strength was just so formidable. And then once we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, I just subconsciously let my guard down, and it was like the rug was pulled out from under me. And the night before this profound experience happened, I was telling you how I was feeling, and you said, well, what's your first thought when you're waking up? And are you getting ahead of those thoughts before they come in? And I realized that I wasn't. And so I went to bed, I slept fairly well, and as soon as I opened my eyes, I prayed. And I prayed a very specific prayer that God would show me the root of my anxiety, the false belief that I was somehow holding on to, so that I could understand why this does keep happening and why I keep feeling those same fears when I feel like I've already conquered them and done the work to conquer them. And each time around, I'm getting stronger and better, and the time in between is shorter and shorter, right? Or longer and longer. But I prayed that God would show me what belief I was holding on to so that I could uproot it and replace it with something of a higher frequency. And I got my coffee and I sat down with a book that I bought a while ago. And I think I'm on chapter 9 or so. But as is the case with God so often, I opened to the perfect chapter and the perfect passage. And the book is It Was Always You by Russ. I'll hold it up for those of you watching on YouTube. I'll link it in the show notes as well. Russ is a musician, a rapper who has done all kinds of cool things. And this is his second book. But this chapter in particular hit me like a ton of bricks. And I felt my physical body have a reaction. And this is what he was talking about. He said, in my 20s, I often felt like I was in survival mode. I felt unsafe and unprotected the majority of the time. My nervous system was out of whack. Can any of you relate to this? I know I can. And I was constantly having to calm myself down. That's why I was drinking a lot. That's why I was promiscuous. And that's why I was overeating. All these things were acts of self-soothing and self-regulating. That's also why I was always in the studio, because music was the only way I was able to make sense of everything else going on in my life. Down in my studio, I could get it all out, even if I didn't quite understand it. Music is really your soul trying to communicate. I would get a release from making music. Working on songs quieted the chatter in my head, the overthinking that can spiral through my head and hijack my brain. Again, can you relate to this? I would sit in the studio every day for hours because it distracted me from my anxiety. Outside of the studio, I struggled to quiet the chatter. I had a big meeting in Los Angeles, and afterward, my overthinking took over. Beforehand, I pressured myself. Oh my God, this meeting has to go so effing well. Afterward, I second guessed myself, questioning why I said certain things, wondering why I didn't say other things, worrying about whether I'd messed the whole thing up. Was everything going to be okay? All of my overthinking stems from one question: am I going to be okay? When that energy sparks up, it's my responsibility to assure myself that's what I needed as a kid, but now it's my job to father my inner child or to mother your inner child. And when I do, the overwhelming fear and anxiety recedes. You're going to be okay. It's all good. I got you. And what I realized after reading this is my fear growing up was always, am I going to be okay? And I love my parents. And so much of my childhood was absolutely wonderful, but there was also a lot that was hard. And I was the oldest, and I felt very protective of my brother. And there were situations where I felt like I wasn't okay, and I wasn't emotionally or maybe even physically safe. And in adulthood, that has translated into when struggles occur, subconsciously, my fear is that I'm not going to be okay. And I'm going to go back to that feeling of being helpless as a child, whether that's money, emotionally, physically.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult now, I know that that is just not my reality anymore. I am always provided for. I mean, the provision of just praying in the morning that God would show me what the root of my false belief is, and then minutes later reading this passage, that in and of itself is such proof of the provision available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me understand that I have the power to change the belief, and I have the power to trust in God's provision, and I have the power to talk my own self off the ledge when I am feeling that deep sense of anxiety that is rooted in this belief that if this happens, I'm not going to be okay. Because I know as an autonomous adult that I have a lot of power, and I can make whatever decision I want to make, and that I can choose mentally to be okay no matter what, and to do the things that I need to do to be okay no matter what. And that gave me such a deep sense of peace, and it allowed me to feel like I can take my power back in such a big way. And so I wanted to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that one, it's a very powerful revelation to be able to tie the way your mind works back to a core belief, whether it's from your childhood or, young adulthood or whatever it is. I think it's very helpful. It helps us understand. It helps us understand why we tend to process things the way that we do. And it's kind of that aha moment. Once you understand it, now you can recognize it and put it to bed as a falsehood, if it is a falsehood, right? And in your present day, maybe it was the situation
as a child,
but now the situation is different. You are different. Your ability level is different. And now you don't need to have the same emotional response to uncertainty or instability or whatever it is, because you have the power to change that.
To reel it
And
in.
yeah.
Yeah. And so my opportunity lies in recognizing that much of my anxiety is rooted in my desire to feel safe. And for women in general, women want to feel safe. Men do too, but women especially. But what I'm realizing is my ability to feel safe is largely up to me and the thoughts that I choose to think and the decisions that I choose to make. And I can have my own back. You know, again, I say this over and over, but we are very powerful beings. And when we can master our thoughts, we can master our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a big opportunity for me to, when I'm feeling that anxiety that is rooted in this fear that I'm not going to be okay because it's going to make me feel unsafe, I can reel that back in and tell myself or ask myself, is this real? Is this actually what you believe? Do you really feel like you aren't safe or that you're not going to be okay?
Yeah.
So taking the power back. A point to note, 2 points to note in respect to this is if you are feeling anxiety that recurs on a regular basis, ask for guidance. Maybe you feel more comfortable talking to a therapist or a good friend. I like to talk to God. I also am a big fan of therapy and good friends. But the example that I shared with you was like real time God answering me in real time. So I think I encourage all of you, if you are struggling with something, to reach out and ask for the guidance on it. And then another thing that I found helpful in this process was thinking about what caused me anxiety as a child. And was it a fear of not being okay? Was it that safety was in jeopardy physically or emotionally? Did you fear financial insecurity, etc.? I think that recognizing what we had reactions to as children is helpful in adulthood because it allows us to see where this anxiety or fear began. And then we can logically speak to ourselves as adults and rewrite the script. We have the power to rewrite the script, and we have the power over our thoughts and decisions. And while we cannot control everything, we do have a lot of creative power over our lives. So many opportunities and lessons within this occurrence, so many opportunities and lessons within anxiety itself, because I feel like it's always trying to teach us something about ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the last thing I want to say is, and I touched on it, is I have the opportunity when this happens to have my own back and to talk my own self off the ledge. And I have the power to undo that limiting belief that I will not be okay, because it's not true. And I can turn that life draining belief into a life affirming one. And so in my case, I can alchemize, if X happens, I fear I will not be okay, into, if X happens, I know I will be okay, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
This is also where faith and the frequency of belief is very helpful. When we believe in a God that loves us and in a life where everything is happening for us, then it's a lot easier to stomach tough times. We've talked about this before. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. And when we turn to the frequency of belief by choosing what we want, acting on it, and believing relentlessly that it is ours, we take our power back. And when we let anxiety take over, we're just giving our power away, right? So we can choose to take our power back. No one has power over your thoughts but you. No one has power over my thoughts but me.
Yeah.
No one. And no one has power over my anxiety but me. No one has power over your anxiety but you. And no one has power over your fear but you. And same for me. And taking our power back is just such a huge, hairy, big part of this process, but it's necessary. when we look for safety, the ability to be okay, affirmation outside of ourselves, we are giving our power away. But when we choose to create safety within ourselves, to overcome fear within ourselves, to do the work that we need to do mentally and stop looking outside of ourselves for comfort or safety, it has the power to completely change your life.
Yeah, I think to your point, when um, that fear and that anxiety comes from a place of self-doubt.
Yeah.
That because I'm saying exactly what you're saying in that in that in that space you are fearful or you have anxiety that things are not going to work out for you, or that you're not going to be safe or whatever. But you as a person not only mentally have the ability to push that aside and say, no, that's not true, but you personally, physically have the ability to handle anything that comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's recognizing that that is now who you are, that you are capable, and understanding that you are capable. So now you no longer need to fear those things.
Mm-hmm.
And when those thoughts start to arise, putting them to bed with the new understanding that you have of yourself and your capabilities. And I think that as adults, we grow up and we don't recognize that. So we never grow out of that mindset from childhood or from whatever point in our life that seed was planted.
Mm-hmm.
And until we get to the point where we're having anxiety, we're having fear, and we're having to come back to it over and over again, until eventually we're like, look, I'm sick of this. For one thing, I always am fearful of these things that either never happen, or if they do happen, I'm always fine on the other end of it. So we're forced into the cycle until we have these realizations like you've had and you're having.
Mm-hmm.
There's also one other thing that I want to point out, just as a interesting observation in this whole timeline. If you're done,
Yeah,
if
please.
this is a good
Please
minute.
observe away.
So the funny thing about it is, if you were going to have these feelings, you would have thought that they would have been dominant,
Yeah.
A month ago. So we put a ton of our financial outlook into Villa Secreta, and that as an investment, along with some other investments. And we went all in on these projects, and we're near the end. And if you've been in business and been an entrepreneur or in real estate, so often it's about timing.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just get to the next month, everything's gonna be gravy.
Yeah.
But it looks pretty treacherous from now until then. So it's timing.
Just no liquid cash available. We basically, from a woman's perspective, let me just explain this. We reinvested almost all of our money, and a couple of the projects took a little longer than we anticipated, which does happen. And so our little stockpile of monthly expenses dwindled down to almost nothing compared to the output of of the expenses of these multiple properties that we were having to have the overhead on.
Yeah. So the observation is we both had to tap into this, tap into our higher selves, in that we have to stay positive. We have to do the things that put us in this positive state, because that's the reality that we're going to create. Our backs are against the walls. And so we were hyper vigilant about our mindset, about having gratitude and being thankful in that period of time that was such a crunch. Okay.
Just a vice grip.
And we navigated it so well
Yeah.
based on the amount of pressure that was on us. But the observation is then we got, we had a buyer come along for a Villa Secreta.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that, in a month's time, all of this stress was this financial stress would be relieved because of that, among a few other moving pieces. And that's when the letdown comes of, oh, okay, I can breathe. I don't have to I don't want to say like put on this show for myself, because it's not putting on a show,
it's being hyper vigilant.
But in certain ways, you are convincing yourself. You are faking it till you make it, in a way.
Well, you're telling yourself that everything is going to be okay, even though the circumstances aren't necessarily supporting that.
Yeah, you're creating the reality that you want while your necessarily physical circumstances do not align. And that takes a lot of energy, but you recognize that you have to do that in that moment. And then so when some of that pressure is released, there's a letdown, because I know you're talking about your experience over the last couple of weeks. But if you remember, a few weeks before that, I had the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because we got some relief, and then I let down. And I was like, okay, I don't have to, I'm not going to do my mindset work for a couple of days. I'm not going to
You're just going to relax.
In the gym. I'm just going to relax. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to, be on my phone way more than I need to be. And then all of a sudden, bam, you're right back in that place. And what happens is, more than, for me, the habit is that I have to recognize is my mind will search for something to worry about if I don't recognize it.
Yeah, mine does too.
If I don't recognize it and stop it, or if I'm out of practice with those things that keep my mind in a good space. So, you get through this big, huge obstacle, and then all of a sudden you're not on guard anymore. You're not hyper vigilant. You're not vigilant, and that old mindset starts to creep in. Honestly, when you're in a better position, than you previously were. It's just kind of funny how that works. But I guess it does all come back to, you're just vigilant and on guard when it's very obvious that you need to be. And then when it's a little less obvious, it's easier for that stuff to creep in.
Yeah. And I think talking about this is a good reminder for me that every single day we have the opportunity to choose our thoughts. Otherwise, our thoughts will be chosen for us.
It's imperative that you choose your thoughts daily. And that's why I asked you, like, immediately when you wake up, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Because that's the easiest time, in my opinion, to overcome those negative thoughts. Is right when I wake up in the morning. If I've trained myself and trained my mind to immediately go into positive self-talk, like, can't wait to, jump out of bed. This is going to be an amazing day. Those sorts of things. Whereas if I don't do that, there's a little bit of a darkness that follows the night if you allow it.
Yeah.
From your subconscious, I think. And then, so if you're not proactive about that, or if I'm not proactive about that, the longer that I wait to address it in the day, the harder it is to shake.
Yeah. And I don't think I've shared this on the podcast yet, but I have shared this with my friends. I read a book called The Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. And the whole gist of the book is about healing your mind. And so anytime I'm feeling any kind of way that isn't positive, I ask the Holy Spirit to heal my mind. I literally will just say, please heal my mind. Please heal my mind. And then if I need to, in respect to my, money mindset, in respect to my body, in respect to how I'm feeling about this person, heal my mind. And it's incredible what bubbles up after that ask. You know, we can always be asking for guidance and always be asking for help from a force far more powerful than we are.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap with a question. Why don't you ask it, love?
My computer went dark, so I've got to open.
Uh-oh. Okay, well then I'll ask it. Will you choose fear or will you choose faith? Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to The Freak Show with Sam Thurmond and me, Jacqueline Steele Thurmond. We would love to connect with you via our website, beckonliving.com, and on social media.
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Beck and Living, and you can join our email list to receive uplifting messages, podcast and business updates, and discounts on high-frequency products just for our freaky community.
Cheers to high-frequency living.